In the early spring of 1817, a modest log cabin stood alone on the rolling hills near Adams, Tennessee. The Bell family, John, a weathered farmer in his late 40s, his wife Lucy, gentle and devoted, and their 6 children, whose laughter once filled the home, believed they understood hardship. They had endured backbreaking work clearing land, planting crops, and coaxing a living from soil that refused to yield. But nothing in their humble existence could have prepared them for what was to come, an invisible presence that would haunt them for more than 3 terrifying years, and that would become known across the young American frontier as the Bell Witch. At first, the disturbances were subtle. Late one evening in March, John, returning from his fields, paused at the door to rest a moment. He felt, rather than heard, a faint tapping from within the cabin, knocks that sounded as if someone tapped deliberately with a knuckle against the rough-hewn plank wall. The children had been snug in bed for hours. Inside, Lucy stirred when she saw John enter, but she said nothing of any noise. Perhaps John assumed he had dreamed it. Still, a quiet dread settled in his chest. The following morning, while Lucy hung freshly washed linen to dry on a line, Betsy, their 15-year-old daughter, played alone near the creek that bordered the property. As she skipped stones across the water, she heard a soft whimpering coming from the woods behind her. The sound was so faint that she thought it might be a wounded rabbit. When she turned to look, nothing moved among the dense pines and buckeye trees. On an impulse, she placed a hand over her heart, took a deep breath, and returned to her work. For a moment, the world felt as it always had until she felt a sudden gust of wind and saw the laundry flutter violently on the line, as though an unseen child had run through the yard. Betsy hurried back to the cabin unsettled. That night, the family gathered for supper of salted pork, cornbread, and turnip greens. The firelight danced on their faces as they gave thanks. Suddenly, a sharp rap sounded from the corner of the room near the hearth. Lucy tensed. Glancing at John, he frowned, rose from the table, and approached the wall. The knock came again, 3 quick taps. He rapped back twice with his knuckles. 2 sharp knocks in return. Lucy gasped. John straightened and shook his head. "Must be a loose board, I reckon," he muttered, though unease tugged at him. When he peered behind the wall, there was nothing but shadows and half-packed firewood. In the days that followed, the activity escalated. The knocks transformed into scratches, slow, deliberate sounds like a fingernail dragged across wood. These scratches crept from the floorboards to the walls, always just out of sight. One evening, as John polished his iron plowshare by lantern light, the lantern snuffed out on its own, plunging the cabin into darkness. In the flicker of a lit wick, he noticed red welts on Betsy's neck. She sat on a chair at the table, trembling, trying to stifle her sobs. When John demanded to know what had happened, Betsy could not speak. Her hair was mussed as if someone had yanked it, and thin red lines marred her pale skin. All she could whisper was, "It pulled me. It pulled me." Lucy, desperate for answers, implored the neighbors to pray over the home. Reverend Mitchell, a traveling preacher, arrived one Sunday with a small congregation. They formed a circle inside the cabin, holding hands and singing hymns. Their voices filled the cramped space, echoing against rough logs. At first, all was quiet. Then, during the second hymn, a series of loud thuds reverberated from the loft above. Everyone froze. The thuds became a steady, heavy pounding, as if someone stomped relentlessly overhead. The congregation rushed outside, afraid that a wild animal had entered the cabin. But when they climbed into the loft, they found no creature, only an overturned mattress and 2 chairs strewn about. Reverend Mitchell prayed aloud, invoking protection, then departed at dawn, visibly shaken. He never returned. As spring turned to summer, neighbors whispered that the Bell farm was cursed. Travelers on nearby trails reported seeing strange lights flickering in the woods at night, glowing like will-o'-the-wisps. Fires that burned at the cabin's hearth would suddenly flare up or dim as if controlled by unseen hands. On more than one occasion, food left on the table vanished, bowls of cornmeal gone, a fresh-cut ham turned to nothing. Betsy claimed the spirit whispered her name before plucking items from the counter. Other villagers attempted to dine with the Bells, only to find chairs rocked violently or tables shaking when they settled down to eat. Some swore the laughter of a young girl drifted through the air, a cruel, mocking laugh that chilled the blood. By autumn of 1817, the attacks became personal and relentless. Betsy was the focus, but no one felt safe. Her younger brothers, Jacob and Rachel, reported seeing dark shapes move at the edges of their vision while they played. At night, they woke to unseen fingers pinching their cheeks. One morning, John found muddy footprints circling the front porch prints that ended abruptly at the doorstep, as if something materialized and vanished. When he followed the prints inside, every chair in the living room was turned over, and all doors slammed shut on their own. Out of sheer desperation, John nailed extra planks across the doors and boarded the windows at night. Yet the banging continued, accompanied sometimes by a guttural voice that growled insults when anyone dared approach the walls. In December, the spirit began to speak clearly. One evening, as the family huddled around the hearth, the children clasped their mother's hands, and John sat quietly in his rocking chair. A low, hoarse voice emanated from the corner. Lucy's hand froze midair as she lifted a spoon of stew. The children watched in horror. The voice said, "Good evening, family." Each word was measured, as if spoken from deep within a cavern. John rose and aimed the lantern toward the corner, but saw only shadows dancing in the flickering light. "Show yourself," he commanded, trying to sound brave. The voice chuckled, a low, mocking sound that made Betsy tremble. "I am here, old Jack. I have always been here." The family gasped as candles flickered violently, extinguishing without wind or smoke. Lucy rushed to relight them, but when the flame returned, the room appeared still, silent, as though no spirit had ever spoken. Word of the Bell Witch spread across Tennessee. Curious travelers, local hunters, and even soldiers on leave from the War of 1812 made their way to the Bell farm, hoping to witness something inexplicable. Some claimed to see the specter, a woman dressed in ragged black, her hair streaming like wisps of smoke, drifting through the grove of trees. Others swore they heard her call their names in the dead of night. One soldier, overheard recounting his experience at a nearby tavern, insisted he saw the witch hovering above the family's roof, her eyes glowing red as she shrieked curses. A local doctor, Dr. Thomas Walker, was summoned to tend to John after an attack that left his tongue apparently paralyzed. John, once a robust man, now weakened daily. His tongue swelled grotesquely, making speech nearly impossible. Dr. Walker poked at John's tongue with a clean finger, recoiling at the sight. He drew a small vial of tincture from his satchel and administered it, but within minutes, John writhed in pain as if the liquid burned him from within. He fell unconscious, and for days was too weak even to sit. During his delirium, John mumbled incoherently about a female spirit that fed on his strength, calling him Old Jack in a voice that reeked of decay. The local magistrate, William Gordon, decided enough was enough. In early 1818, he convened a small court of inquiry at the Bell residence. Armed with a Bible, a notepad, and fierce skepticism, he sat at the head of a rough-hewn table while the entire Bell family and half a dozen neighbors looked on. Magistrate Gordon posed questions aloud. "Who are you? What do you want where you dwell?" The first question was met with silence. Then came the scratching light at first, then insistent. Gordon rapped his cane, demanding the entity speak. To everyone's shock, a voice emerged, clear as day. "I am the spirit of Kate Batts. I once cursed John Bell, and I return to claim what is his." The magistrate, pale but determined, wrote furiously in his notebook. He challenged the spirit on biblical grounds. "If you are a servant of the Lord, answer this. In the name of Jesus Christ, reveal to us something known only to John Bell." The knocking tapered off. For what seemed like an eternity, nothing stirred. Then, in a voice as chilling as the December wind, the spirit named a secret prayer that only John and Lucy had spoken weeks before. Lucy gasped, clutching her cross, while John's jaw hung open. The magistrate dropped his pen. Following that court session, reports of the Bell Witch escalated. Sometimes the spirit claimed to be hundreds of miles away, describing a small town in Virginia, its streets and taverns, a vivid detail proven impossible. At other times, it predicted that John would die before the new year, the family learned to dread the evenings, for when dusk fell, the entity grew bold. One night, as Betsy sat stitching by candlelight, invisible hands tore at her spool of thread until it burst apart. She cried out, throwing the spool to the floor. The candle trembled, casting grotesque shadows. She saw a single pale finger beckon her from the darkness, but when she reached out, nothing met her touch. Her scream echoed through the cabin. By late 1819, John's health had deteriorated severely. The tongue paralysis returned in vicious fits, swelling, cutting off his ability to eat or speak for days at a time. Fellow farmers murmured that John was cursed. They whispered of dark deeds committed long ago in the valley land disputes, backroom betrayals, maybe even violence. Some speculated that John had wronged Kate Batts in life, though historical records indicate no clear connection. Still, the legend persisted. Newspapers in Nashville and Knoxville ran brief stories about the Bell Witch, often ridiculing the family or branding them charlatans seeking attention. But many credible witnesses, local ministers, traveling merchants, militia officers corroborated the Bell's experiences in letters and affidavits. On December 20, 1820, the spirit's ominous prediction came to pass. John awoke that morning feeling as though something crushed his chest. His mouth felt as if filled with lead. He tried to speak. Only a croak emerged. Lucy and Betsy sat by his bedside, cradling his head. "Papa," Betsy whispered, tears streaming. "Please fight." But John's strength had been sapped for months. His breathing grew shallow, eyes glazed. At dawn, he slipped into unconsciousness. When the sun rose fully, he was gone. A small black bottle lay empty on the nightstand. Its contents, unknown and unremarked upon in the family's journal, Dr. Walker pronounced death by paralysis of the heart, though he admitted he could find no physical evidence to explain John's sudden collapse. As the family wept, the spirit's voice rang out through the cabin, loud enough to be heard in the yard. "I have taken old Jack. He belongs to me now." When the funeral procession formed, the coffin lowered into a shallow grave beneath a gray sky. The witch appeared one last time. She mocked the mourners with bawdy songs, shouted obscenities, and derided the preacher's sermon. Neighbors, unable to bear the insults, fled to their wagons, covering their ears. At twilight, the voice fell silent. No more knocks, no more scratching. The horrors that had stalked the Bell family for 3 long years seemed to vanish with John's death. Yet the story did not end there. Lucy and her children eventually sold the property and moved to nearby lands, attempting to escape the memory. But travelers passing the abandoned cabin still spoke of torches flickering in unlit windows, echoing laughter where no human stood. A few settlers who briefly occupied the house reported waking to cold breath on their necks and bedsheets tugged at their feet. By the mid-1820s, the Bell property was left to rot, a cautionary ruin whispered about in every tavern and inn in those parts. Decades later, historians would comb through court records and newspaper clippings to piece together the Bell Witch phenomenon. Some attributed it to mass hysteria, latent mental illness, or even a prank gone too far. Yet the consistency of testimony from the local magistrates, inquisitions to letters exchanged among prominent citizens lends credibility to at least part of the tale. The fact that Dr. Walker's medical notes describe paralysis episodes for which no earthly cause could be found remains inexplicable. Betsy Bell, long after her sisters and brothers married and moved away, gave occasional interviews to curious scholars, recounting with uncanny precision the voices, words, and the feel of invisible arms around her neck. Today, a small historic marker stands near the site where the Bell cabin once stood. Visitors who tread the fields claim a certain hush settles an absence of birdsong, a quiet so deep it presses on the ears. Ghost hunters set up equipment, hoping to capture electronic voice phenomena, but their recordings remain inconclusive. On moonless nights, some swear they hear faint laughter carried on the breeze, as though the Bell Witch still waits for newcomers, eager to once again make playthings of the living. Was it the vengeful spirit of Kate Batts, denied her rightful vengeance? Was it a malicious demon drawn by fear and consternation? Or was it something older, something tied to the land itself, a remnant of Native American spirits, displaced by settlement? No single explanation satisfies every detail. The Bell Witch legacy endures because, unlike most ghost stories, It is tethered to documented events, to court transcripts, to medical records, and to eyewitness accounts passed down through generations. If you find yourself driving along the winding roads of Robertson County, Tennessee, and the moon dips low behind the hills, consider turning onto County Road 1108. Let your lantern is being catch the rustling branches in the old cedar grove. As you approach where the Bell farmhouse once stood, step lightly and listen. Should a quiet knock sound against a broken fence post, or a whisper murmur your name from the shadows, know this: you are not alone. The Bell witch may be gone, but her echo remains. And in that echo, an invitation and a warning: tread carefully, for some spirits refuse to rest.